Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Marketplace Report by Handmade Seller Magazine. I'm Amber Christian, the editor of Handmade Seller Magazine, and today it is my privilege to welcome Sid from Bulletin.
Oh,
Now, if you haven't heard from Sid, let's have her give an introduction and share a little bit more about Bulletin. Welcome to the show, Sid.
thank you, Amber. I'm really excited to be here. The handmade community is such an engaged and special community, and it's a big part of the Bulletin marketplace. Anyway, I'm Sid. So I am the general manager of Bulletin, and I've been with Bulletin for a while. I think it's 5 years, 5.5 years now. But yeah, excited to be talking about Bulletin and um, more about the handmade products that we have and engaging with this community.
All right, so let's jump in and go into our first question. Can you share more about the origin story behind Bulletin? Like, what was happening at the time that Bulletin was created? And tell us more about that ethos around what Bulletin thought when they were first getting started.
Yeah. Well, I was not around in the very first days of Bulletin. We were actually founded back in 2015. And our founders, Ali and Alana, their mission was to reimagine wholesale and specifically spotlight female owned brands. And what started as physical fairs eventually grew into physical retail locations across New York City. And so we had, I think at the height, 5 brick and mortar stores across the city, from Brooklyn to Manhattan. And what Ali and Alana realized is that there was really a need for a better way for buyers and brands to connect.
Mhm.
And in 2019, they created a platform, and the platform was designed to give independent brands a place to sell wholesale. And at the time, that was uh, really groundbreaking. Wasn't a lot of online wholesale marketplaces that offered a streamlined approach to do that. And that's actually when I joined as head of product. And so I got the opportunity to develop and launch it in 2019. And we've continued to evolve since then. So in 2022, Bulletin was acquired by Emerald. But that's really the origin story. We're founded in a very value driven mission
Mhm.
to help small businesses. It's expanded. We obviously don't only support female owned creators, sellers at this time, but we are still very mission driven, very value driven. That's a core principle on the Bulletin marketplace and part of our community. It's always been at the heart of our mission, and remains true today.
Mhm. So now, given the evolution, originally starting with the shows and the brick and mortar locations, now as you've shifted into the marketplace, so can you speak a little bit more to what countries can sell on Bulletin? What kinds of categories are available for the folks that might not be familiar?
Yeah, definitely. So we're primarily US based brands. We also welcome international brands, um, especially if they have if they have US distribution. We partner with trade shows. That is something I'd love to talk more about, especially since our acquisition with Emerald. And one of the things that our partnering with trade shows does is open us up to the international community much more. So, international brands that are exhibiting at trade shows are able to join Bulletin and list their products on Bulletin, even if they don't have US distribution. If they're not part of a trade show, you can still join, but you have to have US distribution to sell on Bulletin,
Hmm.
and Canadian brands also are able to sell on Bulletin. But we don't have a niche product type. So as long as it's quality, I guess I could say quality is our niche. So whether you're a brand or you're a buyer, you are vetted, and we only have vetted sellers and vetted buyers on Bulletin. And it's really a comprehensive curated marketplace. You can find apparel, you can find pottery, you can find glassware, and furniture, lighting, jewelry. So it runs the gamut, but quality is the thing that pulls every element, every product every person on Bulletin together.
Mhm. So let's speak a little bit more about that vetting process or that application process, both from the buyer and the seller perspective. So what do you do to vet the buyers before they come?
Yeah.
It's not something I've really talked too much about with other marketplaces. But given that this
Yeah.
is a business to business marketplace, can you share a little bit more about what does vetting a buyer look like these days?
So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. We have a team that this is what their job is. Once you
Mhm.
sign up as a buyer, we make sure that you are who you say you are. We run a number of different checks. And we also partner with a company called Balance. And Balance actually provides credit terms for our
Mm.
buyers. So, one of the benefits of selling your products on Bulletin is that the buyers are given, qualified buyers are given terms and credit. And that's done through Balance. And so they also do checks. So when you sign up and you apply for credit terms, they do their own types of background checks. I think they actually partner with Plaid, which most people will
Mm.
know.
Mhm.
And nothing, comes out of their bank account or anything like that, but it just gives us the opportunity to check that they are who they say they are. We
Mhm.
collect documents and keep them in, secure, private, nothing that we're able to access, but just making sure that they actually have the right tax IDs so that they can buy wholesale. We don't want a individual trying to get a deal and shopping consumer on our site, which is meant for wholesale. That wouldn't be good for the brands. It wouldn't be good for us.
Right, exactly, and that's a
Yeah,
unique challenge that wholesale marketplaces have, and to make sure people aren't really just masquerading and trying to get a deal, as
exactly. And
opposed to
we
you.
definitely saw people try to do that in the beginning when we were
Mhm,
first launching. And we had these checks in place, but they've definitely evolved and become much more sophisticated over the last 5 years.
mhm. So that's the buyer side of it. Now, on the
Yeah.
seller side of
Oh,
it,
seller side.
what does the application, the vetting process, what does that look like? Is there a typical time period for how long it takes? So if someone's thinking, "Oh, this is an interesting platform, I may want to apply," can you speak a little bit more to the process for the brands that want to sell on your platform?
Definitely. So the first most traditional way to get on Bulletin is to apply. So on bulletin.co, and the first thing that you see is, are you a brand or are you a retailer? That's the language that we use on the site at this time. I switch back and forth between saying buyer and seller and all the different words, but you click brand and you have an application and you fill out your name and your website and how many years you've been in business, and then an actual person is going to review that. So they're going to check the
Mhm,
website. Does the website exist? Does it? Are they able to find your documents, like public documents about your business, and does your business exist? Are you on other marketplaces? Like, there's a lot of other things that we check, and we want to make sure that the brand is who they say they are. I have seen some wild things over the years. Somebody claiming that they're a brand and it's not the right domain. And they're
mhm,
signing up as impersonating somebody. Now, that has happened, I can count on my hand, how many
mhm,
times. It is not often. But we want to make sure that people are who they say they are, that they're selling the products that they are saying they're selling, that if they say that they're handmade products, that they're handmade, that they're not mass produced somewhere else. So we do our best to do all of those checks. And uh, then, if they get approved, it's a very quick process to fill out the application. We've done a lot over the years to make it as easy as possible. You can come back to it if you don't complete it. We have an integration with Shopify. So if you're on Shopify, we pull automatically all of your catalog, or as much of your catalog as you want to share with us. Then that also syncs any updates that you have. So if you make updates in Shopify, those updates get pushed to Bulletin. If you get orders on Bulletin, you can fulfill those in Shopify. So we want to make it easy. Like, we're a small team. We know most of our brands are a small team. And so we want to make it as easy as possible to maintain their listing and their profile on Bulletin. Um, and we're always open to hearing how we can make that easier. But that's the application process. And that's what we're looking to see.
And so with it being a more general marketplace, you must have just a huge range of categories. And are you seeing a lot of evolution in the categories? Do you feel like it's staying pretty steady over time in how the categories are evolving for you?
We've definitely seen an evolution. I mean, when I joined Bulletin, it was not far from our focus on female founded brands. And
Mhm.
the aesthetic has changed, especially since we started working with trade shows. We still, I am sure that people are familiar with Bulletin, that they still have an idea of what a Bulletin product looks like, and you can
Mhm.
still find those products on Bulletin. But what once was once you when you were looking on Bulletin, you might think of stickers and pins and um, snappy sayings and things like that. Those are still on Bulletin and they still do well. But now we actually see home and kitchen being our most popular category. Candles are ever uh, uh, present on Bulletin, and they do really well on Bulletin as well. So candles has been a mainstay, I would say, probably from the
Mm,
beginning.
sure.
But lifestyle things have evolved into more home we're seeing now, and I think that that was a direct reaction to the pandemic and
Mhm.
people being at home, um, spending more time in the kitchen, trying different recipes and things, wanting to beautify their home. And so
Mhm.
retailers, of course, want to capitalize on that, right? They're seeing
Mhm.
that that's what people are doing, and they want to be able to sell the products that their consumers want. So home has become a lot more popular on
Mhm.
Bulletin, trending on Bulletin. Um, we've also seen um, smoke shop categories. You know, there's obviously a very specific set of things that we can sell,
Mhm.
but beautiful glassware that look like art pieces that you could have in your home. That has also risen in popularity a lot, especially over the last couple of years, with various states changing their policies on marijuana legality and such.
Mhm. So now, when the marketplace first launched, was it just an extension of the retail? Was it always a wholesale marketplace? Talk about how
Mm,
it worked at the beginning versus how it might work now. Because someone that might have come across Bulletin in 2019 when it first started, marketplaces evolve, they change. How has
hmm
had it worked before versus how it is working now today?
Yeah. So I started as head of product, so I can really go deep on this. I'm going to try not to get too in the weeds. Uh, and I've already shared, some of the evolution from the physical to the online. We did in 2019, just before the pandemic, actually decide that we were going to go full into the online, and so we didn't have any brick and mortar anymore. But the first foray into technology was actually supporting those brick and mortar stores, and then the evolution of the
Mm.
marketplace came from that. Um, the marketplace, the focus was very different in 2019, and it was extremely curated.
Mhm.
There It would take, and I actually think I neglected to answer this in a previous question, but it would take months to hear back from the team that was vetting brands. And we've shortened that down a lot. So it might take a couple of weeks at the most, unless it's extraordinarily slammed for some reason and we'll tell people. But it's no
Mhm.
longer like months wait or that you don't hear back at all, which was a terrible experience. So
Right.
everybody hears back from us. And
Mhm.
the focus of it has to be female founded or it has to be this value driven, that hasn't changed. You can indicate if you are those things now rather than us requiring it, but it is still curated. We are still
Mhm.
curated for quality, like I said, and that hasn't changed, and there's no plan for that changing. The other big change is the acquisition of Bulletin by Emerald in 2022. So for people who aren't familiar with Emerald, and they may have heard that Bulletin was acquired by New York Now, New York Now's parent company is Emerald, and Emerald
Hmm.
produces live events and trade shows all over the world, primarily in the United States, but they do produce live events and trade shows all over the world, from content to product, trade shows like New York Now, and experiential things as well. And what we have done with partnering with these trade shows is focusing on how we are bridging the in person and the online. So these in person events are fantastic in helping you meet people in person, deepen those relationships.
Hmm.
And I think, especially again, post pandemic, people were really longing to connect and
Hmm.
to meet face to face, to have those meetings. Also, I mean, we're here talking about handmade products, right? Like, you want to see what it
Yeah.
is that you are purchasing. You want to smell the candle. You want to feel the wax. You want to see the container. Maybe it's jewelry. Those things are really important, and you get that in person.
Hmm.
You can send samples, but meeting with somebody in person, and especially being a value-driven marketplace and connecting and that sense of community, it made a lot of sense to support and enhance the in-person experiences, these trade shows with Bulletin. So, what Bulletin is looking to do is enhance these episodic experiences by providing a place to connect throughout the year and do that really easily. So, how are you going to transfer your connections really easy? How can you use Bulletin as a CRM if you don't have the money for a HubSpot or you don't have the team to do that?
Mm.
How can you make people aware of your newest products throughout the year when you're not going to be at a trade show? Or maybe you're only able to attend one of the trade shows this year and you're not able to attend, the five that you usually do because of life events or something. So
Right.
we want to facilitate that connection. And that's really where we've been growing our feature set on the marketplace, on our different products. So we think of the life cycle not as a funnel. We all hear about a funnel, right? You come in at the top and then you make the sale at the bottom. Not to say that
Hmm.
funnels don't exist, but with a marketplace, we think of it more as a wheel. So it's this
Okay.
flywheel,
Hmm.
and you're going through the cycle throughout the year, right? There's different buying cycles throughout the year where a buyer is looking for holidays, or they're looking, yes, for some chase buying. Maybe they need to get Valentine's Day stuff right now, but there are different cycles throughout the year, and they're constantly coming back. And so we want to engage them at every different point of the circle. So we think of discovery, engagement, and sales. And then each of that has, like, smaller parts in there, but we've been focusing on discovery, how we can make that much more personalized. Engagement, we've created something called bulletin boards, which is like Pinterest for wholesale, where you can get your buy together. You can
Ah.
see it all in one place as a buyer. You say, okay, I'm going to New York now. These are the brands that are at New York now. These are the products that I'm interested in. Favorite, favorite, favorite. Organize them. See how they all look together, right? Because you have to imagine what it's going to be like on your wall.
Right. Right.
The other thing that brands can do with these bulletin boards is create them privately for buyers or publicly. So they can list them, they can share it on social media. They can say, I'm going to be at New York Now, here's my New York Now collection. Or I'm going to be at Surf, here's my Surf collection. Or I'm going to be at IGES, right? And here's my collection for that. And it might not be the same, right? Somebody who attends Surf in New York Now, they might attend both, but there's a little bit of a different consumer there, but you
Hmm.
might be at both. And so you
Right.
need to think about what your brand is, how you're positioning yourself at each as well. So you can create these boards, publicly post them, or you can send a private board to somebody. Maybe you met them at the show and you want to follow up and say, these are the products that we looked at together. Here they are. And you can send it to them. And
Hmm.
then it's really easy with a click of a button for them to add it to cart and to check out on Bulletin.
Okay, so let's dive into this a little more. Now my little tech nerdy socks are kind of like, ooh, let's talk about this on the wholesale,
Definitely.
because I haven't seen anyone talk about this. So is what you're saying? So if I'm a seller, let's say I meet someone at a trade show, we have a great conversation. I take my little notes to the side, what products, all of that. You could actually essentially create almost like a little Pinterest board to send to them. they could just add that whole thing to the cart. Hey, here's the products that they put it all together, the products we talked about. With a click of a button, they can add it to a cart, check out, and it's basically a pretty seamless process.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
you've built tools that say, hey, post trade show follow up.
Yes,
Here's a great way for you to be able to use our platform then to buy those things.
yes.
So that's a very interesting and different approach. I haven't heard anyone talk about that before. So that's a unique integration point that you have with the Emerald trade shows, is that you
Right.
bring, if because they're buyers. So is everyone that comes through particular Emerald trade shows then on Bulletin, or is that not quite how it works? How does that all? Can you elaborate on that a little bit about how that works?
Definitely. And thanks for keeping me on track because I can get really excited about products and features and what we're building. That is definitely my background, but I wanted to come back to that. So, as an Emerald exhibitor, you do get access to Bulletin. So every
Ah.
exhibitor, every brand that's exhibiting at an Emerald trade show, eventually they will get access to Bulletin, and they can decide to list their products on Bulletin, or they can decide to sell their products on Bulletin. And Bulletin becomes a place where you can see all of the brands very easily, like a directory, but you can also shop it, and it's there year round. So you can go back and you can see who you connected with as a brand or as a buyer. And by being at an Emerald trade show, by exhibiting at an Emerald trade show, there's obviously a level of quality control there already, right? Because trade
Mhm.
shows are not cheap.
No, they're not.
And so if you're going to be at a trade show and you're representing your brand there, you do get to have a Bulletin profile for the shows that we're integrating with. So we can't, with a snap of our fingers, do it immediately all at once. We're starting with New York now. We're going to be launching with 5 other trade shows in the Emerald umbrella later this year, and many more next year and the year after. So it'll keep growing. And as Emerald keeps growing, when it's appropriate, we'll continue to integrate with their trade shows as well, or
Mhm.
our trade shows, because we're all part of the same company.
Yeah, and that's something I think the average person would not really realize by understanding more about kind of what's going on in the broader umbrella of what's happening, that there's a whole lot of other things going on behind the scenes. And so there's a couple
Yeah,
ways in. There's the trade show path in, there's also just applying to sell. So there's multiple paths that people can take in depending on what fits their business and what's going
exactly.
on.
And if you decide that you're not going to exhibit at a trade show, you can keep your Bulletin profile. You don't like
Mhm.
automatically lose it or anything like that. You get to
Mhm.
keep your Bulletin profile and you can continue to sell your products on Bulletin. There are definitely benefits that Emerald exhibitors get, but
Mhm.
you can still list your products on Bulletin and sell your products on Bulletin even if you don't exhibit.
Mhm. So now, how do marketplaces are tough to figure out how to deal with the pricing?
Hmm.
And even before we started recording, I was talking about how a lot of marketplaces, especially on the wholesale side, don't make as much money as people think, given the
Yeah.
costs to run infrastructure and all of that. How do your fees work for Bulletin? Can you talk a little bit more about how that all fits into this grand structure?
So if you're applying to sell on Bulletin and you're not coming to us through a trade show, there's no fee to join. If you're coming to us through a trade show, there is part of like a larger booth package that you get access to Bulletin. So it's part of that. But if you're not coming to us through the trade show, it's a standard 10% on your reorders and 15% on your initial orders. So the first time that you connect with somebody on Bulletin, we take 15%. The next time that they order, we'll take 10%. And that's it. There's no hidden fees about shipping. There's no hidden fees about you getting paid. The brand will get paid 14 days after they ship products, regardless of whether or not we get paid by the buyer. That's just what we have done since the very beginning, and you don't have to pay extra. So I know that people do sometimes want to get their money faster than 14 days. Maybe that's something that we'll do in the future, but right now it is 14 days guaranteed and at no extra cost to you. And you get paid for the shipping as well, unless you created a free shipping promo code, which you can do
Mm.
as a
Mhm.
buyer. Sorry, as a brand, you can create
Mhm.
your own promo codes. And if you say you want to give free shipping, then that's on you. But if you don't do that, we pay you back for the shipping cost. Now, if
Mhm.
you're an exhibitor, it's slightly less. So if you're an exhibitor, it's 12% and 8%. So 12% on that initial order and 8% on the reorder. And then no matter whether you're an exhibitor or you're not, 0% on any referrals. Now, this can be somebody who's already on Bulletin, but you're moving your business to Bulletin. Like, let's say that
Mm,
it was on another marketplace, but you would like to put all of your sales through Bulletin or more of your sales through Bulletin, then you can invite them to purchase from you on Bulletin and we'll still just take nothing, 0%, because you've had a relationship with them prior to being on Bulletin. We're only taking that larger fee if the discovery has happened on Bulletin.
So if you basically did the matching, that's where the fee comes into place. But if somebody really wants to leverage your infrastructure to do all the order processing and all that, because they don't want to stand up their own whole kind of separate one on whatever platform they're using or deal separately, they could run it through your infrastructure using the referral links and then get up and running that way. So that's another option for people as well. Um,
And if that person happens to be on Bulletin already, so like you refer them, but they're already signed up, you just send an email to support and just
mm,
say,
mhm,
here, just make sure you do it within like a couple weeks of getting that order so that it all seems timely and everything. But you email to the support, and then we are able to do it on the back end and make sure that that referral relationship exists for that order and all future ones.
mhm. So now marketplaces.
Yeah.
Marketplaces are a bit of a two-headed beast because you have to find the buyers or the retailers, and then you have to find the brands. And is there anything that you feel like is unique or a little niche about how you find those buyers and sellers? Can you elaborate on what that process looks like for you?
So two-sided marketplaces, I just have to say that I love two-sided marketplaces. It's my one of my product passions. It's what drew me to Bulletin in the first place, and it is really hard. The interests are often competing, and you have to balance those two sides. But I love that difficulty. I love that tension. It's it's that walking that tightrope is something that I deeply enjoy. But anyway, we can psychoanalyze that on another call, perhaps. Um, no, we won't do that today. But if anybody has any theories and you want to let me know because I don't know. But it's actually what drew me to Bulletin. So I reached out to Ali and Alana when they first just announced that they had gotten funding. I reached out and I thought, they're going to need a product person, and I want to be that person. I'm really passionate about this stuff, so I just reached out and before there was even a job listing, and put threw my hat in the ring. But how are we attracting and maintaining this balance is what you asked, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because you kind a lot of marketplaces, they're like, well, it's usually easier to find sellers. It's usually easier. Not always. It kind of depends on what's going on with your marketplace, but the buyer
Yeah,
side of it is often, it's like, wow, to get the orders, it really is a perfect storm, right?
yeah.
There's a seasonality thing with your buyers for the retailers. So there's seasonality where they are on their own credit
Mhm.
terms, all of those
Mhm.
kinds of things, existing things that they have. There's a lot of factors that go into this.
Yeah.
So you have to really steadily constantly be building your pool of buyers. And so I'm curious, does that all come through the trade shows, or are there other things you do, or what can you share? Not everyone wants to share their secret sauce, so I sort of kind of understand if you can't necessarily tell us everything,
No,
but would love to
I'm
know a little
pretty
bit more about how you do
open.
that.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty open, and we're pretty open at Bulletin. It's changed a lot over the years, and we've tried a number of different things. Um, there initially we had a much larger sales team, and we had uh, people and on the ground making phone calls and using connections. There's an element of that still. We have, and that's on both sides, by the way, on the
Mm,
buyer and seller side. There's obviously social media, and I would say that for a while, Bulletin had a decent presence and was pulling in a decent amount of especially buyers from social media. And sometimes the quality of those buyers wasn't what we were looking for. They weren't always who they said they were. And thankfully, we do have the vetting and the approval process that happens. Um, but we still do some of that. And the trade shows are a big part of our growth strategy. And
Okay.
getting into the community, getting integrated into the trade show itself, into the mobile app, making it really easy to transfer any connections, any contacts that you made through, scanning leads and things like you do on the trade show floor, inputting business cards and everything, and getting that into Bulletin and facilitating those sales through the platform when you're in person. Some brands have very sophisticated tools already set up for that, and so they don't need Bulletin for that on the trade show floor. But we're really focused on small businesses and especially those who are more new to wholesale and providing those tools in a very accessible, familiar way. And that's
Mhm.
also how we have used, how we have grown. And that's core to the Bulletin ethos as well, is being familiar and accessible.
Mm.
We are we are a wholesale platform. We do have wholesale functionality, which can be very complicated,
Mhm.
setting various case packs and minimums that you need to hit. And we strive to do it in a way that almost looks like a consumer site. So it
Mhm.
doesn't look like this crazy spreadsheet that somebody who is not familiar with wholesale is going to be potentially overwhelmed by, and also doesn't really speak to like the fun of buying. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
buying is fun. Most of the people I remember doing interviews when I first joined Bulletin and trying to understand buyers and sellers better because I come from a tech background, and that's the part that most people just love. They don't want a machine or algorithm to take away that fun. I
Mm.
love
Mhm.
hearing that buyers are scrolling through Bulletin like they would Instagram on their couch with a glass of wine in their hand and, kind of paying attention to the TV, but just looking at the new brands and looking at the new products that their favorite brands have launched and scrolling. And that's what we've designed Bulletin to do, to integrate into the person's everyday, to make it really easy, to
Mm.
make it inspirational. And that is more part of our ethos. It's part of the growth strategy in that we want Bulletin to be known for that and for people to share that experience and that fun, right? It's not
Mhm.
just a thing that they have to do, but it's something fun that they do and engaging that they do and that they look forward to doing and spending their time browsing Bulletin.
Mhm. Yeah, so even as a buyer, I mean, they're creating their own little private Pinterest boards basically. "Oh, I like
Mhm.
that. I'll come back and look at that later. That one
Mhm.
looks interesting." And then they could essentially mark anything they find interesting to put on their little board and then come back later because they have to do a merchandising strategy. They have to
Exactly.
look at how do all these products fit together. And so by trying to make it as easy as possible for them to collect as many things as possible, it's easier
Mhm.
to do the merchandising side of it because then they can be in their store looking around, figuring out what they're buying, figuring out everything else. And so a lot of
Mhm.
it is making the tech consumer grade for the buyer, which is
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
In saying, yeah, how do we, we they're not going to necessarily impulse buy on Bulletin. Oh, maybe they do if
No,
you have a
not
few
really.
glasses of wine. Probably not.
No.
But they'll pin it to
No.
their
They give them
board to come
yes,
back and look
they
at. And
do.
that's the important piece. Is that's the impulse pin is what you're after, not the impulse buy. The
Yeah.
the edit to your board. Oh, that's right. I liked that. Because you
Yep.
otherwise you would just scroll right by it. Or so what I think I don't hear is that you're using a ton of AI to shove stuff in front of buyers necessarily. You're still allowing the buyers to control more of the experience and letting the buyers do the searching and take the reins as opposed to using some of these newer tools to push it all in front of them.
Well, look, I mean, we've got recommendations, of course, and we have
Mhm.
personalization. Like, we wouldn't want a buyer who's attending surf and they are looking primarily for resort wear, active wear, and things like that to be shown something completely irrelevant, like, kitchen products or something. So we do, of course, we talk about we talk about the surf buyer who's looking, or the outdoor OR buyer who's looking for like a kayak or something, but they're not really buying kayaks on Bulletin. But you're not going to want to serve jewelry or a jewelry to somebody who's looking for the outdoor gear, or vice versa, right? Because we have got jewelry shows that we're going to be working with too. So that type of personalization is important, knowing who they are and what they're looking for. But what you won't see on Bulletin is, I'm looking at a brand and on the bottom I see recommendations and they're a competing brand. That's something you're not going to see on Bulletin. We
Mhm.
have we have I think that we are a very empathetic team, and we look to see both sides, and that's the part of the fun of that tightrope, right? The What the seller is looking for, and yes, they're looking to make really strong connections and they want to stand out. And then the buyer looking for something that's new, maybe something, or something from their favorites, but we don't want to undercut anybody. And so you're not going to see that type of behavior on Bulletin.
Mhm. I like hearing that. I think a lot of people that would be interested in selling on there like hearing that too, because that is always one of the challenges. Um,
Yeah,
s
because there is a lot. There's a lot out
oh,
there.
it's
Yeah.
and it's constant. Yeah, and
Uh-huh.
that's I think something that everyone deals with, and that becomes part of the race to the bottom problem too. But
Exactly.
we
Yeah.
won't pontificate too much about that. Otherwise, we'll go off. We could go down the rabbit hole for hours and talk
I
about
it
that kind
could
of stuff.
definitely.
So now you do have a Shopify integration to bring those descriptions in, but let's talk a little bit more about. So if you are selling wholesale, let's talk about product descriptions for wholesale. Can be
Hmm.
a little different than consumer. You give them a starting point with your consumer descriptions, but can you speak to a little more about the mindset that particularly sellers and handmade artisans should think about in their descriptions for wholesale?
Yeah. Well, on I will speak for Bulletin, and
Mhm.
the thing to remember about most Bulletin buyers, even in this day and age where we're working with trade shows, is that people do tend to be value driven, and at the
Mhm.
very least they want to know about you. And I mean, I think that's important for as a consumer when I'm shopping, but maybe
Mhm.
I'm a more conscious consumer. But when you are putting your brand on Bulletin, when you're putting your products on Bulletin, you want to talk about the story and the description. Who are you? Why did you make this? Why is it important? Why is it different? And in wholesale, also think about talking about how to display it, how to
Yeah.
best display your products
Mhm.
when they're in the store. Does it need a display? Do you need to sell it with a display? Do you recommend that it's near certain things, or pairs well with this or that? These
Mhm.
are things that I've seen in descriptions that I think are really helpful. Some buyers are going to be very seasoned and they're going to have this in their mind, and others are going to be maybe launching their first online store or their first brick and mortar or something, and they're looking to fill up their store. And this is going to be really important for them to help display your products in a way that's enticing. It's
Mhm.
not just, grabbing something and it's going to come and I'm going to throw it on, but you need to, if it's a sweater, for example, think about how it's being positioned and what it's going to be sold with, and try to tell that story in the images, tell that story in the description, and on the brand page, definitely tell who you are and the things that you offer. Do
Mhm.
you offer private labeling? Are you open to doing collaborations? Are there any specials that you're running? All of those things are important. And ultimately, also, if you're running a promotion, that also is going to get eyeballs as well. So if you have a promo running and new buyers get a certain something, maybe a free gift, maybe samples, maybe discounts, make sure that that's front and center as well, because that does talk. Um, what
Mhm.
we have found, what we have found when we look on our site and the browsing patterns, is people do look at values, and they
Mhm.
always talk about values. but they really look at price. They do look at
Hmm.
price too. And
Hmm.
so if somebody is going to be a repeat buyer, can you do something special for them? It's something to keep in mind.
Hmm. I think also that helping there's an education component on wholesale for the buyer, because it's not just here, slap up my product, you figure out how to sell it. Like, no, 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 no,
No.
no. If
Yeah.
you know how to help them sell it, you're like, hey, if you have a store that has this and this, you should put them together because we've learned that these tend to sell well together.
Yep.
That is so helpful for that buyer versus just one other brand. And if it's a I'm just dumping my stuff on here and it's your problem to figure out how to sell it, that feels like it's not that's an adversarial relationship. This should be a
Right.
cooperative thing, like, hey, here's what I know. And maybe you're new to it and so you don't know some of that yet, but anything you can do that actually ultimately helps the person selling it sell it
Yeah.
better and easier, they're much more likely to come back if it's like, "Hey,
Exactly.
here's the thing that here's what people should say when they're selling my product. Here's my little shtick
Right.
and my tagline," and they're like, "Oh,
Hmm.
I can say that and I can move
Right.
that product." And then it stands
Do
out
you
in the
know that
mind of
this
the
person
buyer.
sources this from, you know, did you know this person sources this from women who are incarcerated and they help produce the product? Whatever the story is that you need
Mhm,
to convey the to tell the buyers, people who are in the store, right? Like they have meetings and they say, here are our new products. Here's how to talk about them. You need to give them that ammunition.
mhm.
And
And
like
as
you
a s
said, if it sells, they will buy more. That's
yes,
what
and
you
as a
want.
s yeah, as a seller, you have to think about if you're not giving them any information or you're not putting any time or effort
What are
into
they
helping them
saying?
sell, what about the other brands that are?
Yeah.
You have to remember that on those marketplaces, it's all about that complete package of selling that, right?
Hmm.
And so even for wholesale, it's not just, oh, I just cut my costs and just post the same thing. It's not going to help your person that's buying it actually be able to. But if they know exactly what to say, so that when certain types of customers come in the store, they can educate their own staff, you make that easier, an easy part of that, or maybe you provide things that go in the order that help do that education in the store. Whatever that is, now all of a sudden your brand has stood out because you're doing something different than all the other brands are doing for
Hmm.
wholesale. You have to again, you have to think about what else might they be looking at as they're pinning it, as they're thinking about it. And so I think that's one thing I've seen a lot with wholesale, is that it just is sort of this giant dumping ground of everybody else figure it out,
Hmm.
where if you really think about it as that collaboration on how do I give them the right information so they can move my product so they come back and buy more, is what you
Yeah,
think as the person that's selling it. It's the so they come back
definitely.
and buy more. Um,
Definitely.
so now what advice would you give an artisan when they're looking at a marketplace to know if this is the right marketplace for them? Everybody's got such a different business. How would you help an artisan that's trying to think about which marketplaces to sell on? How would
Hmm.
you help them decide what marketplace they should sell on?
Well, first, and you've talked about this before with other people, you don't have to be committed to one. There's no reason
Mhm,
you should be committed to one. We make it as easy as possible to get started on Bulletin, and we want people to stay on Bulletin even if they're on other marketplaces. And we know that if they're going to be on Bulletin, it's got to be easy because nobody has the time to put in all of this effort, right? So, but think about how much time you have. How much time do you have? How much time is going to be required to keep up the marketplace? Um,
mhm,
and I would definitely recommend being on more than one because you're going to get different types of buyers.
mhm,
You're going to see different traffic. You're going to get different margins from different marketplaces. And besides the time that it takes to be on the marketplace and the time that you have, making sure that aligns. You don't want it to be a stressor, right? We've already got enough. Everybody's got enough on their plates. Also think about the buyers that are coming there, and does it align with your values and who you're bringing in? Bulletin, for example, if you get an order from a buyer that you can't fulfill for some reason, like a zip code protection or it's just not where you want your products to be, then you can decline it and you will never be penalized. We give the sellers that power. So think about that as well. Will you get penalized for declining orders for some reason? Or can you control how your brand and your product is portrayed?
Hmm.
Do you care about that? Do you just want sales? That is okay. Everyone's gotta make money. Is that something that is important for you right now? Okay. Where are you going to get the most eyeballs? Or are you more concerned about who's buying your products right now? Just, you have to weigh these things. There's no one right answer. It's going to be unique for each seller. Um, are they going to help you grow your business? Are they going to respond to your questions? Do you care if they do? Do you
Hmm.
want somebody who's going to hold your hand a little bit more? Or, you don't need that right now, right? Um, think about what it is that you need and then what aligns best with what you need. And it's not going to be a perfect, there's not going to be a perfect fit. There's no like, marketplace soulmate and it's the one and only. But there's definitely rounding up good enough and somewhere where you can grow. Uh, I think that's important. What's going to help you grow as a business? What's going to help your business grow? What do you need to grow? Who's going to help you with that the most? Um, but definitely try multiple. And unless there's a fee for closing your account or something, which like on Bulletin there isn't, just try multiple. What do you have to lose, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
You
and
can
there
give it a
and there
couple
might
months to
be,
try.
yeah, I mean, there might be small fees to use some of these marketplaces, and that's just, they have infrastructure costs as well. But
Hmm.
I think your point is really well taken about you have to try it because it's such a different set of audience, time of year, buying patterns, your products. It's, you need that whole perfect storm to all come together.
Right.
And sometimes on the surface, you can't necessarily tell if it will on that marketplace or not. And that's why I always advocate try multiple, even though you're like, oh man, I got to maintain it in multiple places. Yeah, there's some systems, some solutions that you can do that can help with some of that as well. Now,
Hmm.
so if people want to actually apply to sell on Bulletin, so let's say that they're not at one of your trade shows and they want to apply it to sell on Bulletin, how do they do that?
Super easy. Go to bulletin.co and click apply as brand or I'm a brand. And you'll be taken to the application, and then you will hear back within um, probably 2 weeks
Sure.
with any questions or anything like that. But it's just bulletin.co and I'm a brand. And in fact, maybe I can give a link when you post this. That can be like a special Handmade
Yes.
Seller Magazine link, which would be great for people to go to if they're interested.
Yeah. So now for the fun one. This one's completely subjective, and I love to
Okay.
ask everyone this because I learn about some really interesting products that are out there. What's the coolest thing, in your subjective opinion, that you've ever seen sold on your marketplace? And you can feel free to pick a couple if you can't choose your favorite, like choosing a favorite child kind of thing.
Yeah,
What's
there's
the
so
coolest thing?
many. Okay, there's so many different things. I know what I'm going to say is the coolest thing. It came to mind pretty quickly. I had we had a colleague that worked with Bulletin and was working specifically with me on product stuff back in the early days. And she left to pursue a passion of creating jewelry. And so she started creating jewelry and started selling on Bulletin and was one of our top sellers for a long time. And her jewelry was featured in Madewell for a while as well, crummy stuff. And so I think that's really cool. This is an intern. This is somebody who was eventually working on Bulletin. And then she left Bulletin to go pursue a passion of creating jewelry. She started by creating clay and then moved into glass and beadwork, glass beadwork. And it's just so special, right? Somebody that you worked with and they're selling their products on the marketplace. And um, yeah, so crummy stuff. I think that's really cool. It's just, you know, it's special. It's She's a wonderful human being. And then that's a great story.
Hmm.
But there's lots of cool stuff that gets sold on Bulletin. Be Rooted is like stationery, and it's um, founded by a woman who's wanting to represent her culture and have her culture be seen in the stationery. And she's at New York now. There's these gorgeous handmade glassware. Um, Alice Sturzinger. I'm saying that name wrong, but we feature her bowls at our booth at New York Now. Canna Style has these such fun pipes and bongs, and they're like beautiful pieces of artwork. I mean, I don't actually smoke green, but I could hang it on a wall and it's gorgeous, you know? I mean, there's so much cool stuff. Local Vermont candles. I'm in Vermont, I think I mentioned before, and I love seeing Vermont products on there. There's beautiful chocolates. Um, my a friend of mine was selling on Bulletin for a while. She's not doing wholesale marketplaces at the moment, but she did my wedding cake, and she happened to be on Bulletin. Like, I don't know, I just love seeing. There's so many cool things. Go, you can't spend 2 seconds on Bulletin and not see cool products.
Hmm.
There's just really interesting brands. Everybody's got a story,
Hmm.
um, and and I love poring over our directory and seeing where people are coming from and what inspired them to build their brand and to build these products.
Hmm.
I can't tell you just one, but anyway,
Yes, and I love that tagline, "Everybody has a story," because I think
they
that's
do.
so true of handmade and of our industry, and we
Oh,
don't have to be afraid
absolutely.
of telling our story because that's a key piece to that emotional attachment to handmade that so many people
Mhm.
have. So
Mhm.
now, the all important, how are people going to find you outside of this interview? Can you tell them how they can find you on socials and how to
Yes.
follow you to be able to follow along and learn more?
Yes, definitely. Okay, so bulletin.co is the website first and foremost. Just
Hmm.
bulletin.co. And on Instagram, it's the same. So instagram.com/bulletin.co. And we feature a lot of our brands on Bulletin. We do feature buyers occasionally as well. Stores have stories too. They
Yeah.
have a viewpoint and they have an aesthetic. And we love to feature the buyers as well. So buyers and brands all get featured on Bulletin. We try to talk about industry news, of course, trade show news as well. So bulletin.co on Instagram and bulletin.co for our website.
All right, fantastic. Well, Sid, this has been an awesome interview. It's been super fun to dive into a lot of topics I don't normally talk about with people, especially that I'm still thinking about that Pinterest for buyers. Sorry, I'm like a little obsessed with the concept. I'm like, that's so cool. But
It's really
uh,
fun. It's really fun to have the different boards and actually, it's really fun to see what boards, the titles people give to their boards.
oh,
It's really fun. I don't know, like, who's with or anything like that, but like we can see the titles and the first thing that I do when I'm looking to buy gifts for people is I'm like, what's trending on Bulletin? What are the buyers looking at, and where do I need to do my holiday shopping?
oh, so fun, so
Yeah,
fun. Well, again, thank you so much for
my
joining us,
pleasure.
and thank you everyone that tuned in as well for this interview. And we will catch you next month.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me. This was a great time. Thanks, Amber. Bye.